I'm Andrew Gibbons, that never changes, and something that changes from time to time, but changes always in terms of the better for Rebecca being here, is that Rebecca is my person today to converse with on a subject I know very little about. I know very little about most things, but I just pretend otherwise. On this, I know I don't know much about, so I'm not even going to babble about it because I know so little. I'm entirely in your hands on this one, Rebecca. Tell us who you are, what you're up to these days, and start us off on this one, please.
Thank you, Andrew. Yeah, lovely to chat to you again. My name is Rebecca Norton from Sense of Direction, and yeah, I was really excited to be able to share this with you. So I was introduced to thinking environment when I did my teacher training quite a few years ago now. It was my tutor, Lou Mycroft. I give a big shout out to her. She was very influential in my training and introducing me to thinking environment, and it had a massively positive impact on my learning, but also on how I interact in meetings, how I deliver my training. It is such a powerful concept. Very simple, really.
They're often the best. They're often the
powerful.
best.
Exactly, yeah. And I think so many businesses, organisations, even families could really benefit from understanding and using the thinking environment a lot more.
So let's go back to basics. Who are we talking about here, and when did it start?
It's a concept by a lady called Nancy Kline, and I believe it was around sort of the 1990s when she introduced this. So she's got two books. I'm sure she's probably got more than that, but the two books that I've read that she's done are A Time to Think and More Time to Think, and they were both very, very good books that I really enjoyed, just introducing the thinking environment and explaining some of the theory behind it and some of the applications as well. So she introduces 10 components of a thinking environment, but there are also a number of applications in how you can actually use this concept to enhance people's thinking and listening skills. You know, I don't think we're always very good at listening skills in this country, and that's a big one. Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so I'm really at a very fundamental first acquaintance with this, which surprises me as someone who thinks he's got a reasonable grasp of what's going on. Because every now and again, I find something that's more than 20 years old, and I'm thinking, why didn't I get a hold of this 18 years ago? So one of the challenges for me, I guess, in my naivety, is for someone like Nancy Kline to present a topic which, for a lot of people, would seem dismissively obvious. Well, yeah. Time to think. I can write a book on that. You know, you think and you do stuff. So what's at the heart of what she's trying to present that's different, that's not common sense?
It's giving everybody a space to think, literally, metaphorically speaking, and physically speaking as well. So I'll just quickly run through the 10 components, if that's all right. Yeah, I think that would be a really useful thing just to introduce. So the 10 components of a thinking environment, as stated by Nancy Kline, are attention, ease, equality, appreciation, encouragement, feelings, information, diversity, incisive questions, and place. So if you have all of these in situ and or you're sort of employing all of these in your conversations with people, then the idea is that it creates a much better atmosphere for creative thinking and allowing people to have the time to think, I think, sometimes as well. So have you ever sat in a meeting and you're thinking, for God's sake, when's that person going to shut up? Can I have my turn yet? You know, or something along those lines. And then when it is your turn, you feel like you're being rushed by somebody else and you're worrying what other people are thinking about you. It doesn't generate really good quality thinking. So when you use these components and have these components in place, everybody gets a time to talk. Everybody understands that they will have that time and that there is no need to rush, and therefore you can spend a little bit more time and relax into your thinking. And everybody respects you as a talker, and it's, you know, expected that everybody will give their full attention to you as a talker as well. So this for me sort of links into that thing around are you listening to understand, or are you just listening to respond? Because if you're forming a response in your head, or you're thinking, oh well, this happened to me and oh, I wouldn't have handled it that way, then you're not truly listening to what the person is saying. So for me, it links in with that quite well as well.
Okay, well, that's given me loads more to come in on. I'll just try and confine myself to one or two. I think you're right. First of all, on the latter point, most people aren't listening, they're waiting to talk. I think Carl Rogers said that people are waiting to talk. You can see it. It's almost like they're physically moving towards you and hold themselves back because they're so not listening to what you're saying. They're just readying themselves what they're going to say, irrespective of what you just said. So I can see the linkage to there. I'd also maybe think, when you mention meetings, we've all been in those meetings you describe, where people aren't listening to each other, they're just talking in turn, but talking over each other in turn. I've never been in a meeting where the chair of the meeting says, let's just pause for a minute and think. That would be a fantastic meeting for a chair to say, there's a lot going on here. There's a lot we need to be thinking about. Can we just pause for 30 seconds and think about it? Have you ever been in a meeting like that?
Not a meeting as such, but like I said, when I was doing my teacher training, we used to sit in so it wasn't a typical classroom, it was in a beautiful setting as well, I have to say. But the tables were always spread out like a horseshoe.
Yep.
And what we would do at the beginning of every day and at the end of every day, we would have a thinking round. So everybody knew that everybody was going to get an opportunity to speak. If you didn't want to, you could pass. Very rarely people did.
Because we don't want to put pressure on people that want to think and nothing more.
No, exactly. So that was but everybody knew they had an opportunity to speak if they so wished. And because of that, because everybody knew that everybody was going to get a chance to speak, it also helps to sort of encourage self-monitoring as well. So people generally didn't go on and on and on because they knew that everybody had to have a turn. So at the beginning of the day, it would be, what are you thinking about? So it might be that you've had a horrendous trip to get there, or maybe you're concerned about something else, or maybe you're really excited about the day ahead. And you could share whatever you liked. And that was a really good introduction into the day. And so everybody else would listen and just be present, fully present. And then at the end of the day, we would do the same practice. So we would finish off at the end of the day. So again, if you had anything on your mind, that was your opportunity to share. Or if you wanted to say thank you to somebody. And it made such a big difference to the atmosphere within the class. It was transformational. It really was.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear that because I do something a little similar, though it's significantly different and not as good. With groups I see, for instance, once a month, I'll always do a check-in. I'll always do what's happened since we last saw you, what you've done, what's important, what do you want to share with us. So it was more an explanation than a thinking. I think it's more powerful to say, what have you been thinking about, rather than what have you done?
Yeah, it is, and I think it just gives people, you're also acknowledging that person as a human being, not necessarily just as a human doing, which I think is what we're all getting pulled into a lot of the time, isn't it? We're all busy doing things rather than just being. So I do think that's quite important. And the other concept that I love about it, and again, this has influenced my training greatly since learning this, was that Nancy Kline believes that nobody has truly arrived in a room until they have spoken. So everybody is encouraged to say something, so for me as a trainer, I now use that as a concept. So I will always get my participants or the people there to introduce themselves or have some sort of conversation with them before the training starts. That is really, really important to me, so that everybody gets an opportunity to be present in that room.
I've seen this done in an instrumented sort of way, and I don't think it always works. I remember doing some very early works in what I laughingly call my career, going back 38 years ago. One of my earliest experience was working, and I learned a heck of a lot from working with YMCA social skills trainers that we brought in, or I brought in for a particular program, one of the earliest things I ever did. And these people were extremely competent, extremely experienced people. I wasn't. I'd been there weeks in the role. And one of the things they did was they have groups in a circle, and they had a ball. They had a sort of like I don't know, can I describe it, sort of a soft bore. And it's like the conch in Lord of the Flies. You only spoke when you got the ball in hand. And if you wanted someone to speak, you threw the ball to them. Actually, I saw this on in the thick of it with Malcolm and his bunch. So they did it too in one of their away day type stuff, but for the opposition. Anyway, the point is, you can do this in a contrived way, and it's better to do it in a more authentic, genuine one, I think.
Yeah, and I think the way we certainly did it, and that's my understanding is the way to do it, is that somebody would volunteer to go first, and then we would move to their left. Or so we would have, so you knew that it was going to go around, so you knew that it was coming to your turn. And I think somehow that makes it easier, because you know whether you're getting nearer to your turn or not, rather than I want to shout now, I want, or whatever it is. But I think that one works as well, though. I think the throwing the ball thing, because but it does have to be introduced in the right way. I did, to be fair, I was so passionate about this and so enthusiastic about it. I did actually try and introduce this into I was working for a charity at the time as well, and I did try and introduce this into our meetings, and it didn't go down too well.
I think sometimes we impose our favourite things because we think they're so great, and we're naive that it's the wrong context.
Yeah, it was just because we hadn't set it up. It needs to be introduced right from the start. Everybody has to buy into it. Otherwise, it's just not going to work.
Otherwise, you get people saying, "What's this weird thing we're doing here? What the hell is going on? Some hippie thing,
Yes, indeed, exactly. So
we're going to have to take our shoes off and all sorts of sick cross-legged.
Yeah, so it has to be introduced and explained in the right way, and it needs to be practiced as well. You're probably not going to get it right straight away, and it needs time for people to trust the process.
And it needs to be enforced, doesn't it? I mean, if people start breaking free of what you want them to do, you've got to say, hang on a minute, the rules are this. I've found that when you've done these sorts of things, you've got to have the wherewithal to say to people, hang on, we're doing this for a reason. You're stepping outside of what we agreed we'd do when that happens.
Yeah, you do. You need to have those boundaries very clear, and everybody has to agree to abide by those boundaries, because it's for the good of the group. It's not just about an individual, it's for the good of the group. And I think that's the important thing about this. It does actually, you get so much further when you have this environment where everybody gets an opportunity to speak. And we've spoken before about introverts and extroverts. This ensures, so the equality is there, so everybody is an equal thinker. It doesn't matter about hierarchies. It doesn't matter about whether being introverted or extroverted. Everybody has an equal opportunity to contribute to that meeting, and that's
okay.
Really
and this isn't theory. This is practice. This is meetings. This is conversations. Because what I'm drawing out of what you're saying already, this could be structural. This could be how there's an expectation of how it should be done, period. It should be part of the culture of the organization, the unit you work in, the team, whatever. And it can be transactional. It can be during a conversation, by the sound of it, that you consciously say, I'm not going to interrupt. I do it all the time. I'm trying not to. I still do it. But you're saying to yourself during a conversation, respect this person, hear them out, ask questions, give myself time to think about what they're saying. What do you think?
Exactly. And you've just done something there as well. So I can't remember what we called it now, but we used to do exercises in pairs where exactly that. So you would have it's very uncomfortable. If you've ever been truly listened to, it actually takes some getting used to, because we're in a world where there's so much noise going on and people interrupting, like you say, all the time.
Yeah.
So we started off with very short spaces of time where we would work with each other for 2 minutes at a time. So literally we'd have 2 minutes to talk or not to talk, but the 2 minutes was ours. So it was ours to do as we saw fit with. So if we wanted to talk or if we wanted to just think, we had the 2 minutes. Then the baton, or whatever you want to, class it as, would pass to the other person, and they would then have 2 minutes to speak, think, whatever. So you knew that you had that in those 2 minutes you were not going to be interrupted. But we had to start with 2 minutes because it was very difficult. It's actually quite tiring and a draining process to fully engage. So gradually we would build up to sort of 5 or 10 minutes where we'd have a whole 10 minutes just for us, just for thinking, or talking or whatever, but we knew that we would be fully listened to for those 10 minutes. Or somebody would be there fully present for us. So whether we were talking, thinking or whatever, they were fully present for us in that 10 minutes.
This is interesting. And of course, here we're really talking about the context of the Nancy Kline thing. We're not mentioning Nancy very much, just the need for what she talks about, writes about. This is taking me to some very interesting areas. I recently read something about a practice in a German organization where in their top team meetings, no one is allowed to speak for more than 3 sentences.
Ah, good idea. It makes you succinct, not rattle on too much.
No, that has to be enforced, doesn't it? Because if there's a general feeling of, oh yeah, we tried that, but so and so gets away with it, and I know I can, the chairperson's going to say, hang on, that was your 3. Stop. Next, please. Yes.
And I have again I can think of some networking events with very different rules, shall we say, sure, but led to very different experiences. So I've been to one where everybody was told they had 2 minutes, and the chairperson would put the timer on for 2 minutes, but then they would sort of go over, and so you'd hear the actual alarm go off, but they'd say, oh, well, I've just got a little bit more, and they'd carry on, and sometimes there's like another extra minute, 2 minutes on top of that. And now in a room full of 30 people, that's a long time to go over. But then on the flip side, I've been in a networking meeting where the lady was absolutely fantastic. You had, and now I can't remember if we had 30 seconds or a minute. I think it depended on how many people were there, but she was very strict on it in a very humorous way, but she made it very clear when the time went off, that was it. Your time was up. But it made it so much better. It was much slicker. Everybody appreciated the fact that she was strict on that timer.
Yeah, when I, in my former political existence locally, in a committee meeting, we would have a stand in front of us with a microphone. We'd have green, we'd have red. Red flashes with 10 seconds to go. And red comes on and cuts the mic off. So you're given a 10-second warning from green to red, and that 10-second warning is when the red starts to flash. So you know you're going to be cut off.
Brilliant. I think that's a fantastic idea. And interestingly, similarly to that, I've just seen somebody talking about it on LinkedIn this morning. I think it was with the Toastmasters, and they have a green screen when you're talking, then it goes to amber, and then it goes to red to indicate that it's your time is up. And I think what a brilliant idea to do that, So there's a bit around discipline, isn't there, with some of this?
There is, and I guess let's not kid ourselves. We're talking about laboratory condition, training, learning event in developmental stuff. Are we talking real world here? Can we bridge this? We're getting excited as 2 practitioners to see the value in this. I wonder if anyone's listening to this. But I wonder if anyone's listening to this thinking, that's all very well. That doesn't work in the meetings I go to on a Wednesday morning in production or in manufacturing, whatever, because so-and-so boss dominates. We all sit there and pretend to have listened. Then we go out because it's not worth having an argument. Can we bridge this best practice, which I think we're talking about, to real world?
I think you can. But like I said, it has to be introduced in a very clear manner to everybody. You can't just have one person saying, oh, I've got a brilliant idea. I would like everybody to now start using the thinking environment. That's just not going to work. You've got to have...
I read this article last night. That's not the way to introduce it to a team of people.
No, exactly not. And I think you would probably have to have some explanation about this. Possibly, I don't want to say it's formal training, but you do need to have some understanding of how it works and also why you're doing it as well. I think there needs to be buy-in from everybody to explain, this is what we're going to try, this is how it works. We'd really appreciate everybody to get on board because we feel it's going to work for everybody and improve our teamwork, our company, our customer service, whatever it is. But
I go with that. And again, I'm thinking of a very rare experience when I was working with a very well-known mortgage provider in Leeds, 20 years ago plus. The chief executive, managing director, I think he was, of that organization, had a very unusual practice at formal meetings. It was on the agenda. The last item on the agenda was a learning review. And in every meeting in that organization, particularly those he ran himself, and I witnessed these, they run through all the items on the agenda, they do AOB, and then the last thing was learning review, and it wasn't rushed through in 2 minutes. It was given the time it needed and said, right, what we learned from this, let's talk through what's come from here that people want to share as learning, because that was thinking time. That was, right, I've been thinking about this and I've learned that, and that I've never seen anyone else do that. And that was a very personal thing that Mike Ockenden did at that time.
I think that's a fantastic idea. I mean, and this is the thing, you know, there are so many different ways you could run meetings that are much more effective. You know, like I said, I think we've all been sat in those meetings where you come out thinking, oh my God, well, that was a waste of 2 hours, and have we moved further forwards, and I'm sick of hearing such and such in department, whatever. You know, I think the benefits of doing it does take some practice. It's not going to work necessarily straight away. It needs to take some practice. It needs to take commitment. Everybody has to be committed to this process. But the impact it can have is just absolutely phenomenally. You know, it's brilliant. It could really, really change things and allow people that time to come up with these ideas to try something different. Because that's the other thing around it as well, is that you have to, when they're talking about the respect and the appreciation, is the appreciation that somebody's taken the time and the courage to share their ideas and their thoughts. So regardless of whether you agree with them or not, that's not the point. The point is that you appreciate that somebody has been willing to open up and share with you their deepest ideas.
Yeah, I think so. I'm hearing resonant voices in the back of my head about a lot of the things we talked about before when we looked at 3 types of reflection and those sorts of things, because I'm writing words down like humility and respectful. There's a humility that's required to think that what you have to say is probably not as important as what the other person has to say. There's a humility that prevents you from talking without showing respectful listening and asking questions. I did a recording fairly recently with John Bowles in which we only talked about the key interpersonal skill of asking questions during conversation.
Yeah,
to get information to think about.
And I think we're also, as human beings, we're often not very good at, or some people certainly aren't good at silence. It makes them nervous. It makes them uncomfortable, so they feel the need to fill the silence. But you know, and I'm sure you've done this yourself with your coaching, you know, and leadership stuff. Is actually you can see when people are thinking. Although they aren't talking, you can actually see them physically thinking. And then if you start talking again, you know, this is an article that I've seen somewhere. It is actually, you know. And it's almost like a physical attack to somebody, or it's an interruption. Sorry, it's a really rude interruption to them. So although they might not be talking, if you can see them thinking, you then talking is really going to be distracting for them, and you're interrupting their flow of thought. So just because somebody's silent doesn't necessarily mean that nothing's going on. So I think if we could all get used to silences a little bit more, that would also be another helpful practice.
I think so, and I think structurally, if it relating to meetings, the bigger the meeting, the greater the noise. The more people who are in a meeting competing for space, the harder it is to get your thinking done. So there are factors like that. But I've written a few other things down here. I've just asked myself questions. Thinkers aren't talkers, talkers aren't thinkers. That's too polarized. I know that it's never that cut and dry. But when you're talking, I am now, you can't think with quality. And when you think, you know, I mean, I quoted the Queen on this, which I'd never done before. Make room for quiet thinking and contemplation, she said of the Scottish Parliament opening 2015. I don't think we do make room for quiet thinking. I think we're too busy competing for the next space to talk. And the more people in any environment in which that's going on, the harder it is to find the space to think.
Yes, and it's to do with energy to some extent, isn't it? The more people you've got in the room, the more energy there's going to be, and that's where it's really important that you give people that time and space to think as well. And I think I love where you found this about the quote from the Queen.
I didn't think I would. I didn't go looking for it.
No, exactly. But I think, you know, politics especially could learn such a lot from this. You know, it's one of my pet hates, watching politicians in Parliament just literally talking over the top of each other and yelling and shouting. There is definitely no thinking environment involved in that whatsoever. And therefore, you do wonder about the quality of thinking, don't you, actually? What comes out of their mouth? Have they really thought about this? Or is it just something that's blurted out?
Well, absolutely. I can't help but be anecdotal here. I've got 39 years of reflection. I've watched intensely people in meetings, and I've looked to learn from them from a very early age, and I still do. Not all of that learning is put into practice because I'm not so good at that as reflecting on stuff and seeing it. But I do remember my first boss. I'm sure he used it as a tactic. He went to a lot of meetings. He was involved in all sorts of stuff, trade union wise, Amnesty International, political and work meetings. He was a professional meetings attender. And I used to go to meetings with him sometimes, and he would say nothing for an hour and a half. And I thought, he's quiet. And then there'd come a time when the chair of the meeting said, Tony, you haven't said much. No, he says, I've been following what's been said very carefully. What he'd done was build himself a platform for the very few things he'd say to be based upon a thorough consideration of what had been said before.
And I think if we all did that, just think how much good stuff could happen from that, you know, and actually listening to people. What an interesting concept, you know, that's the thing, isn't it? And I'm always reminded of this, and I'm sure you've come across it many times. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, and we should use them in that proportion, you know.
I know. Again, I'm all the time thinking, but that's unusual, but I don't usually see that. I've sometimes bleated on about only 2 leaders I've witnessed in 39 years, and that's true, that I've actually worked alongside. I remember the first of those I met, and I would have regular meetings because I was introducing for a 17,500 person organization an appraisal. We didn't call it that system, but that's what it was. And so the chief executive of the whole organization got me in every 2 or 3 weeks to give him updates. How's it going? This is important to me. I want to know what feedback you're getting. And he would sit me down for the thick end of an hour, because he always found time for people, because he organized himself. And he was the first person who's ever given me a good listening to, which I think is another Carl Jung thing. To have a good listening to is an unusual experience. I would sit there and I would tell him this, and I'd tell him stories, tell him how it's going, and he would nod, he'd look up, he'd make notes, and I thought, I wonder what he's writing? And he wouldn't interrupt. And then I'd say after about sometimes 20 minutes, so that's about it. He says, interesting. Tell me a bit more. Because he would always feel that what you've given him wasn't all of it, and it very often wasn't. How often do we ever do that? How often in conversation or in meetings do we say, that's interesting, tell me more about that? No, we're in there interrupting with our own thoughts about what they just said. But he actually did that, and he genuinely meant it.
Yes, and that sounds very much like the thinking environment, because that is another aspect of it, is that once you've finished, again, this was another practice. I'm sorry, I can't remember all the technical names for some of these activities that we did, but it is bringing it all back now. So in pair, we would have this thinking opportunity. So we would say whatever was on our mind, and then our partner would say, and what else?
Interesting. He did that intuitively. We're talking about 1985.
Yes.
Hence he was one of my only 2, because that's what real leaders do. Yeah,
exactly. And what a lovely experience for you to have as well. And I imagine it was a very powerful experience for you to have that as well.
It was, and it's when I talked to others about, he wasn't daft. He knew, because as a new chief executive needing to build legend, he knew it was good for his, perception and reputation to have people like me. And he knew I was out there, and I talked to a lot of people, and I put myself about. I'm sure he did it with others, and it was his way of getting the message out. This man, who's now a lord of the realm, because they get on these people, this man listens. He's a chief executive, and he listened to me, and he asked me questions. Now, I knew from talking to other people, he did that with others as well. I thought, he's a canny bloke.
Yeah, but what a wonderful way of learning about things, rather than going in as a dictator, actually sitting back and taking on board what people think, what people are saying, what they're hearing, how they're interacting with others. What a much more powerful way of learning and getting people on board, rather than coming in and saying, right, this is what I'm going to do, this is how you're going to do it, these are my ideas, you're going to like it or lump it.
We don't learn by hearing ourselves say the same things we've not even listened to ourselves saying for years. We learn from what others are telling us that we've not heard before. So, you know, we're understandably getting all excited about the need for this stuff. Tell me more about Nancy Kline's stuff, because all of this is branched out from nothing more than the importance of Nancy Kline's message. And here we are going into anecdotal stuff and hopefully building bridges to people's real world experience of what's going on. So tell me a bit more about Nancy Kline's message, the impact it's had on you, and the book, if you like. I mean, I don't know what familiarity you have with the book, or if you've revisited it a number of times. It's out there, and quite a bit of her stuff is out there in various forms, audio and video, and other forms as well.
Yeah, like I said, the book, I haven't revisited the books actually for quite some time, and having spoken about it and introduced it to you is something that I want to revisit.
Good.
In the book, it gives more explanation of why these different thinking components are important, and goes into a much deeper explanation of what she actually means by these things. And it is, I can highly recommend it, looking into it. I think it is really, really important that even if we just had a few of these in meetings or relationships with people, it could make such a difference. And I personally feel that it can make a difference in personal relationships as well. It's not just a business thing or a meeting thing. It can actually make a difference to the quality of our relationships on a personal level.
It's not just a listening thing, is it?
No.
Thinking is different to being listened to. I think for me, it's important to distinguish them. There's something deeper, I think, about allowing someone time to think than time to speak. Yes,
but it's still important that person. So, if we're doing this together, it's still important to have that other person present. Sometimes just having, and I find this actually, sometimes I get on better with my work and can focus more having somebody in the room with me. I don't want to talk to them because I don't want distracting, but I like having the presence of another human being in the room with me.
My cat's like that. Charlie's about 8 feet away from me. That's where he stays during these conversations. He doesn't come near it. He just likes to hear my voice when he wakes up every now and again, but he doesn't need to be sat right beside me.
Yeah, and I bet I'd like you to, try this out. Do you work better when the cat is in the room or not?
Definitely. He's company, but he's not company when he starts going and clawing at my leg and tapping it. But where he is now suits me as well.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, even if we just introduce one or two of these elements, it could have such a massive impact. And it's the space to think, is knowing that somebody is there for you, somebody being physically present, but also that they're not going to judge you, they're not going to interrupt you, they're going to appreciate the fact that you've taken that time to listen, to be present, with them as well. And it is lovely because one of the things is around feelings as well, and feelings is around that ability to express ourselves fully. And if you start crying, that is all right. Sometimes we have to let go of things, and we have to really. Now, you see, this is where it's so important that you build up the trust and you build up. I think this works better in a group that you are going to be working with longer term. It will work, I think, with one-off groups and certainly some aspects of it. But I think for me, with going back to my teacher training days, we were a group, we worked together for 2 years. We did our training over 2 years. So we got to know the group, we got to build up that trust and that respect for each other. And sometimes people did end up in tears. And it might just be because they had a lot of things going on, or maybe, like you said before, sometimes you've never heard yourself say out loud some of these thoughts.
Because no one's given you an environment, a platform from which to do that.
Yes, that was safe to do that as well, that you weren't going to be judged, you were going to be fully listened to, but also not jumping in straight away and saying, oh, it's all right, because again, we have to learn to be comfortable with other people's emotions, and I don't think we're very good at that either.
Good point, because sometimes we're too hasty to suppress and to diminish and to say, whoa, this feels uncomfortable, let's make it go away there, they'll be all right. Well, no, well, hear them out, encourage them to say more. There's usually more, I think, in any context than people have actually ever said.
Yeah, definitely. And it's a really two-way thing. We have to get used to being uncomfortable enough with other people's feelings and silences, but we also have to learn to be comfortable in letting our feelings and emotions show as well. And we shouldn't really be suppressing feelings and emotions and things. Yes, there are probably appropriate places to do that. And so I'm not saying, is anywhere, but
the ladies know if we believe what goes on the telly. That's where all the deeply emotional, supportive conversations seem to take place in soap operas.
Yeah, so but it is a case of just being comfortable and getting used to that. It's learning to Be comfortable with the uncomfortableness.
Yeah, I agree with you. And again, let's not build this into something also where it's always about people bursting into tears. I've been in those situations. I've been in the learning business forever, and I've been on residential programs where you hit the feeling. I've been in groups where I've caused people to burst into tears unexpectedly. Whoa, where did that come from? I didn't mean, and you hit sensitivities you don't know you're going to. So, yeah. But it isn't all about that. It could be about dealing with an angry customer. It could be dealing with an angry customer, letting the tape run out, listening to them, looking at them, not interrupt them. And then when the tapes run out, say, I think there's more. I think there's more. Tell me what more there is I need to know. I never see those conversations taking place. I wish I did.
I think that is such a good point, actually. Yeah, and customer service, this is so important. How annoying is it? You've had terrible customer service. You ring up to complain, and all you get is somebody back chatting you. And actually you think, I'm just telling you about your rubbish customer service, and you're giving me more rubbish customer service. Yeah. So actually, if you let people, like you say, letting the tape run out, that's such a wonderful way of putting it, isn't it? Letting people release that emotion. Yeah. Learning that it's not actually personally directed at you most of the time.
Sure, might be.
Letting people release that emotion and acknowledging that, not just saying, oh, well, it's not my fault, or it's not my department.
Seeking more of it.
Yeah, so that because then only then can you actually help that person and improve the situation for them. If you fully understand what's going on for them, what do they want to happen?
Definitely.
And how can you help them?
Yeah, and again, the connection to thinking starts to become tenuous, but it's not really, because what you're saying to the customer is, you must have thought about this. You must have come prepared for this conversation that you're just dumping on me. And I'm a professional person with a genuine interest in you. And I'm going to show that by saying, before I respond to what you've said, are you quite sure you told me all I need to know? I've never, ever had that conversation in a customer service context.
No, and it's also showing that the customer matters to you as well, doesn't it? By acknowledging them and taking on board what they've said, it actually demonstrates that they matter to you and your company. And that's how you can win over an unhappy customer and make them a real advocate. If you handle these complaints in a really good way, you then turn this person from an angry customer into a massive champion.
Absolutely. Well, I'm doing some work on Net Promoter Score, detractors and promoters. You're absolutely right. So we are talking about unusual behaviours here. We are talking about breaking the norm. We're talking about the right context. We're talking about persistence with something which doesn't come immediately, easily. This isn't an easy thing to do.
It isn't. But then you know what? Easy things in life are not necessarily the best things in life, are they?
Well, I know it. I just don't see it. I guess what I'm saying is, I've got a feeling pragmatically that sometimes you're just an island of good practice in a desert of people not doing good practice. You're an oasis.
Yes, I do get that, but I have the belief that if you can change or influence one person at a time, we'll get there.
You've got to believe it, Rebecca. You've got to believe it, or we wouldn't still be doing this stuff.
No, and it's also about demonstrating, isn't it? I'm not just going to change my mind just because other people don't agree with me. I know that this works. I know it's very powerful. I've seen it in action. I'm not just going to give up on it just because I get a few negative responses on it. And I think if we all took that on board, like I said, nothing in life that's easy is necessarily worthwhile. We can do things that's easy, but we're not going to get the best out of people just because it's easy.
Yeah, don't lead me towards my best learning model, my favorite learning model, which is about difficult learning. The low-hanging fruit learning we pick off and say, yeah, okay, but the stop and think about it stuff, the hard stuff, the slog stuff, the go back, start again stuff, that's what we've not got such an appetite for. And that's where the real benefits lie. So I just want to share one other thing with you, which is leading me to think about, without hijacking the purpose of this. We're talking really about having time to think. You're leading me towards my favorite guru, Tom Peters. He's got a lovely series of short videos out there, 3-4 minutes, in which he sits there in his cardigan and talks to camera in a very passionate and absolutely 100% authentic way. He believes this stuff. And one of them was about this, I now recognise. He says, do you know what? After all these years, and he's been in it about 50 plus, all these years in the business of trying to influence people, I've come to realise only 4 words really matter. And when you're in conversation, the 4 words are, what do you think?
Yeah, very powerful, isn't it? But to do that, you have to genuinely, that will only come across if it's genuine.
Yes.
You know, what do you think? And then actually listen to them and take it on board.
Because if you say, what do you think? And they say, oh, well, blah, blah, blah. You've got to live up to your own expectation you've created in the other person. If you ask the question, what do you think? And then you don't listen to what that person thinks and interrupt them, well, you've just shown that's a sham.
Yeah, definitely. And I am one of those people, I think, over the years that I will share openly with people who I can have good conversations with, but I'm very sensitive to the fact that if I don't feel listened to, I'm not going to keep sharing. I will just close up, you know, and I don't offer things if I don't feel listened to. It does make a huge difference, you know. You start thinking, oh, I don't think they're interested in this. Oh, I must be boring them. Oh, I think, you know, they've obviously got more things important on their mind. So it closes down your thinking already.
Last week we talked about was it last week? I don't know, everything seems like yesterday to me these days. We talked about the 6 types of assertion. Because what that's now making me think is, we both agree wholeheartedly, we believe this stuff. We're not making this up. We actually believe this. We believe that it's worth sticking with. I wonder how often, and I know this is not true of me, by the way, I'm not building myself up as someone who does this. I wonder how often we challenge behavior that doesn't encourage this. I wonder how often we're in a conversation where we say, hold on a minute, I want you to know right now I'm feeling disappointed in you because you don't seem to be listening to me.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. And I personally probably don't do it as much as I could, should, whatever it is. It's a difficult one, isn't it? And again, it's sort of approaching it in the right way, being assertive without aggressive.
Yeah. But it kind of goes hand in hand with this, because if you're giving people mutual time to think, part of that enforcement is having the confidence to say, I don't feel you're doing for me what I'm consciously trying to do for you. I don't feel you're respecting what I'm saying and thinking about what I'm saying before you come in with your next point of view. I just want you to know that. Again, do I hear those conversations taking place? No, I don't.
Yeah, and maybe this is around setting the boundaries and the parameters before you have these conversations. I think that was also important to us when we were doing the practices, is it was very clear at the beginning, right, each person is going to have 5 minutes to think, talk, whatever, and the other person is going to listen for 5 minutes, and then you will swap over. How often do we actually agree on terms like that?
And they're not even implicit, are they? We just have conversations which have no rules.
Yeah, so it's an interesting thing, and I think you've made me think there as well when you asked me that question earlier about, you know, how do we get this, and I am a passionate believer in this, so how do I get this across, because I do believe it could make a huge difference. So maybe I have to get brave, maybe I have to start challenging things a little bit more, and maybe I have to become more aware of the conversation that I'm having, and actually setting some of these parameters out before I start a conversation with somebody. That's something that I could do. It will feel awkward, it will feel strange at first, but the quality of the conversations I have is likely to increase.
I think we can do that in a contractual conversation, like a coaching one. But again, we've got to live up to our own expectations of others. We've got to practice, frankly, what we've set an expectation of. I'm not going to use the word preach, but we've got to do this stuff in order to encourage others to. I think that's going to seem, like you say, awkward, unnatural in a lot of work context, and nothing we're talking about is generic, is universal. You can't do it everywhere. There's times where it'd be quite reckless, and you'd be perceived as some sort of peculiar person if you tried to do it in some contexts I've worked in. Yeah. So sometimes it's enough to do what you feel is the right thing to do, and frankly, have lower expectations of others. And that sounds arrogant, but when I work on this stuff with people, I very often say to them, the more conscious you become of trying to do the right things, the more aware you'll become that other people aren't doing that for you.
Yes, there is that danger as well, isn't there? Yeah, definitely with personal development.
So when you're in conversation, I'm doing it now, by the way, and you don't interrupt people consciously, you think, well, that was good, I normally do that, and someone just done it to you. Hey, why aren't they doing this back to me? Because they're not thinking about it.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And even, you know, like I said, even if we just did one or two of these little things from this concept, it could make a massive difference. And I've really enjoyed talking about this with you this morning, actually, because it's making me become more aware again. I think I loved this, and I did it a lot more when I first learned about it, and I still use aspects of it. Like I said, it does influence my training.
Good.
But having this conversation has just reminded me of some of the other aspects of it that I could incorporate into other things in my daily life as well.
Okay, so coming towards the end of what it seems like a very short conversation that's gone on for 45 minutes already, he says, with the stopwatch always evident, so I know where we are. So anyone who's stuck with us to the end of this, what's your advice to them in terms of returning to where we started from, Nancy Kline, time to think? What should we do? Buy a book, go to Amazon and get it for 15p plus £3 postage, whatever it is, look at the videos. What's the best thing we can do next to connect with Nancy's thoughts?
I think I really enjoyed the book. So she had time to think and more time to think. And actually, I really enjoyed more time to think, which I believe was the second book. Mm-hmm. So I think that's certainly one thing. There is a website as well that you can look up. If you just typed in time to think or thinking environment, then you would find more information on there as well. But actually think about how can you have better conversations with the people that you're talking to, even mm-hmm. if the mm-hmm. one thing that you take from this is actually listening and being fully present with somebody and not interrupting them.
Mm. Okay, because we aren't talking about listening, we are talking about space to think, and they're two different things.
Yes, I think being fully present with another human being, and part of that is listening if they're talking.
All right, I can't follow that. That's too profound. Okay, I'm going to stop right there. Thanks a lot, Rebecca. Like you, I found this really interesting. I too will start chasing out references. Thank you.
Thank you.